This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Wednesday, February 26th. This is Africa 54. China is reporting a slowdown in the new coronavirus cases, but worries about the escalating outbreak is rattling global stock markets. South African officials say cooperation with neighboring Mozambique is a key factor in reducing rhino poaching in Kruger National Park. And Democratic front-runner Senator Bernie Sanders is targeted by his rivals in the latest U.S. presidential debate. We begin in Central Africa, where the Burundian government is admitting that it has killed at least 22, quote, wrongdoers in the hills overlooking Bujumbura since last week. The unusual acknowledgement comes as officials say their action was taken in connection with violence linked to the presidential election scheduled for May. Authorities say 2 members of the police force were killed and 6 attackers were captured. The clashes erupted after local residents alerted police to the presence of a dozen gunmen hiding in coffee plantations in the Nyabiraba district. The fighting also spilled into the neighboring Isare district. Chinese health officials are reporting 406 new cases of the coronavirus on Wednesday and 52 new deaths, nearly all in Hubei province. Meanwhile, parts of northern Italy are on lockdown following an outbreak of COVID-19, with at least 7 dead in the region. A new report is warning that sub-Saharan African economies could be badly hit, even if there are no outbreaks of the disease there. Henry Ridgewell has more from London.
At Rome's famous Trevi Fountain, tourists are taking no chances.
Many people virus, so I scared this mask.
Further north, in the regions of Lombardy and Veneto, the epicenter of the Italian outbreak, several small towns have been put on lockdown.
This discomfort and sacrifice, which for now is intended for 14 days, I hope will prove to be effective to contain the spread of the virus.
But with new cases reported in other Italian regions and in Spain and Switzerland, health authorities are struggling to contain the virus. Scientists say it's vital people do all they can to stop its spread.
The containment procedure is there to effectively dampen down the intensity of transmission and stretch it out, so to prevent an overload in healthcare settings.
Iran is one of the worst affected nations outside China, with hundreds of infections and more than a dozen confirmed deaths. These videos, posted on Iranian social media, appear to show long lines for face masks. South Korea is also badly hit, and the US government has advised against all non-essential travel there. In China, where the virus first appeared in late December, infections have topped 77,000, with more than 2,500 deaths.
The window of opportunity for stopping this disease from becoming a pandemic is narrowing very fast. The entire community at the moment is anticipating this will eventually develop into a pandemic. However, I have to point out that in the past we've had similar fears, and what has happened is that viruses just die away.
The global economic cost could hit $360 billion, according to a report from the Overseas Development Institute, or ODI, which warns sub-Saharan Africa stands to lose $4 billion in export revenue. South Africa's lobster industry is in turmoil after China halted imports of seafood.
The factory don't want to take our fish. There's no market for our fish.
Oil and copper prices are sharply down, and big exporters to China, such as Angola, are suffering. The ODI says Sri Lanka, Vietnam and the Philippines will be worst hit.
Everybody's looking back at the SARS impact in 2003. But of course, if we look back, China is now 4 times bigger than during the time of the SARS outbreak. And it's more connected to the world now through global value chains and manufacturing sector.
Scientists are racing to produce a vaccine for the virus, with the first human trial scheduled for April. By then, the COVID-19 outbreak could be a full pandemic, with serious consequences for national health systems and the global economy. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Now, land issues are among the most sensitive issues in Africa. And recently, South Africa's parliament published a bill intended to change the property rights clause in the constitution and empower the state to expropriate private property without compensation. During his recent 3-nation tour of Africa, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said South Africa's plan to allow expropriation of private property without compensation would be disastrous for the country's economy and its people. Now, for more into this story, I'm joined by Ernst Root, AfriForum's Head of Policy and Action, and Monique Taute, AfriForum's Campaigns Manager. Welcome, both of you, to Africa 54. Now, what's the contentious issue behind this bill?
Well, the problem with this bill is it's a move by the South African government to empower the government or the state to decide whose property should be expropriated by the state, and then also to decide what compensation should be, so taking people's property, in other words, and then deciding how much are you going to pay them for the property that you're taking from them, but then also giving government the power or the authority to say, well, in some cases we would like to give people zero compensation, so to be able to take your stuff without paying for it. And it's framed as something that would help the poor and so forth. But we know the South African government, we know what they've been doing for years. This is a push to get more control into the hands of the government.
So you say that as AfriForum, but what are the proponents of this bill standing by? What are they pushing?
The proponents of the bill are saying that this has to be done to correct historic injustices with regard to land in South Africa. The problem with that is there were many injustices in South Africa when it comes to the land issue. There were people whose land was taken from them, and that has to be corrected, and we support that. That is restitution, to say someone's land was taken, we need to give that back. But the problem with this is this would give government authority to take people's property that had nothing to do with restitution whatsoever.
So where does AfriForum come in? And because you're here in the U.S., who have you been talking to, and are you talking about this particular issue?
Just as an introduction, AfriForum is the largest civil rights organization on the African continent. We have more than 235,000 members. And what we are seeing is that there are millions of people in Africa and in South Africa that support freedom and free markets. But what is happening is there's a lot of governments in Africa, including the South African government, that keeps looking to China and think that socialism can still work. So what we're seeing in South Africa is, for instance, that our government now wants to expropriate private property without compensation, and this is a big problem. So we are in the US, we have spoken to the State Department, we are speaking to think tanks, we have also spoken to the Foreign Affairs Committee, members in the House of Representatives as well as the Senate. So we are pushing the fact that it will be detrimental for South Africa as well as other countries who have investments in Africa, well, in South Africa specifically.
So Ernst, as we mentioned in the introduction, Secretary Pompeo did mention that this would be disastrous for South Africa's economy and its people. What's AfriForum's reaction to his comments?
We welcome the comment. We've been campaigning internationally to get more voices abroad to speak out about what is happening in South Africa. And the Secretary of State is right. What we have in South Africa is we frequently hear members of the ruling party in South Africa say that they are inspired by the land reform policies of Robert Mugabe, but they want to do the same thing but without violence. So the fact of the matter is the violence was the result of the policy. So it would be disastrous to tamper with private property rights. We're not saying that there should not be restitution or correction of historic injustices. That needs to happen. But this is something else. This is nationalization of land.
So have you taken a legal action against this bill, and where is that? And wouldn't it be perhaps better to wait until you hear the outcome of the case then?
Yes, so there's a process currently to change the constitution. Part of the problem, there's a court case. We're involved with a court case with the South African government about this because the process is inundated with procedural irregularities. And one of it, to give you an example, is the process currently is to get the public's input on whether the constitution should be changed. And while this process is happening, the state president in South Africa has announced repeatedly that the constitution is going to be changed, regardless of the process. So that means the process is a farce, and it's something that we will take to court.
Now, I read somewhere, Monique, about AfriForum reacting to this issue and mentioning China's footprint in Africa. How does that affect South Africa, especially on this case?
That's the whole socialism problem. So we're continuously seeing that African countries believe that socialism can work, and we believe that, well, the South African governments in South Africa, they are telling the poor people of the country that we are going to take this land and we're going to give it to you, like type of a Robin Hood type of thing. But actually, this is not what's going to happen. Our government wants to nationalize the land in South Africa, and we are seeing, and we actually have a report that we have published, and according to this report and the research that we have done, China actually wants the mineral rights in South Africa. So this is something big that that the US and the world should take note of.
You mentioned that you've spoken to the House Committee and also the State Department officials. What has been their reaction to this?
The reaction, so firstly, we can't speak for the State Department, but the reaction has been very good. We've had many meetings. We met with independent researchers. We met with political commentators, columnists, people in the House and the Senate. And I think, firstly, we can see that people are aware that there's something happening in South Africa that the US should be concerned of, particularly the role that China is playing and how this could have an impact on the US. But so far, the feedback has been positive, and we believe our trip so far has been very good. We are hoping, one of our missions here is to get more public voices speaking out, expressing its concern about what's happening in South Africa, not so much in terms of what the consequences for South Africans would be, but also what the consequences for the US would be.
Right. Thank you very much, Ernst and Monique, for talking to us on Africa 54.
Thank you for having us.
Right. Ernst Roots is AfriForum's head of policy and action, and Monique Taute is AfriForum's campaigns manager. Now, South African National Parks officials say cooperation with neighboring Mozambique is a key factor in reducing rhinoceros poaching in Kruger National Park. Kruger is home to the world's largest wild rhino population and has proven a tempting target for poachers who for years jumped the park's borders. Marisa de Klerk has our report.
South African National Parks' rangers are praising teamwork with neighbouring Mozambique for a fall in rhinoceros poaching in Kruger National Park. During a park-organised media trip to the Mozambique border in the Marula region, where most rhino poaching incursions used to originate in Mozambique, rangers say they are seeing a positive trend.
In the second half of last year, we actually had less incursions from Mozambique than what we did from the South African side with rhino poaching. Between 2018 and 2019, this area had a 53% decline in incursions of rhino poachers, and we lost 47% less rhinos. So it's a massive gain, and that wasn't coincidental. We've done that on the back of a growing rhino population in Mozambique here and a stable rhino population in Kruger Park in this area.
Poachers have long targeted African rhinos for their horns, which fetch up to $60,000 per kilogram in Asian markets. But improved patrols, technology and cross-border cooperation are helping to reverse a rampant poaching that peaked in 2014 when nearly 830 rhinos were killed in the park.
Last year we had 738 and this year it's 536, which is very encouraging. It means that the methods that we have put in place to combat poaching are working.
Police in Kruger National Park, one of Africa's largest game parks at around 19,500 square kilometers or 7,500 square miles, is not easy. Further challenging law enforcement, there is no extradition agreement between South Africa and Mozambique.
So the poachers that commit crime in Mozambique go around to South Africa and vice versa. So without those three elements, communication and coordination and cooperation, we would not be able to deal with this.
The park is also expanding anti-poaching and conservation efforts in villages bordering the reserve. Kruger National Park currently has an estimated 8,600 wild rhinos, a key part of wildlife viewing that attracts over 1 million tourists per year. Officials on both sides of the border hope that with further cooperation, those numbers will only grow. Marise de Klerk for VOA News, Kruger National Park, South Africa.
U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders was the target of his rivals for the Democratic presidential nomination in the latest televised debate held Tuesday night in Charleston, South Carolina. Sanders has emerged as the national frontrunner after victories in the first 3 nominating contests. VOA's Richard Green has the latest chapter in the 2020 presidential election.
In the face-to-face confrontation carried live by CBS News, Sanders, an independent from Vermont who aligns with the Democrats in the Senate, was asked how he would convince voters he would make a better steward of the economy than President Trump, despite the recent gains in the stock market.
Last year, real wage increases for the average worker were less than 1%. Half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. That is not an economy that's working for the American people. That's an economy working for the 1%. We're going to create an economy for all.
Sanders has promised to expand Medicare, the health insurance program for America's elderly citizens, to make it available for everyone, regardless of age. But his rivals, including Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, claim that Sanders' plans to sharply increase social welfare spending for health and education would be too costly.
No, the math does not add up. In fact, just on 60 Minutes this weekend, he said he wasn't going to rattle through the nickels and the dimes. Well, let me tell you how many nickels and dimes we're talking about. Nearly $60 trillion. Do you know how much that is for all of his programs? That is 3 times the American economy, not the federal government, the entire American economy.
Former Vice President Joe Biden used the shooting rampage at a predominantly black church in Charleston in 2015 to confront Sanders about his previous opposition to legislation that would have held gun manufacturers liable for gun violence in the United States.
Bernie voted 5 times against the Brady bill and wanted a waiting period. No, let me finish. And waited a waiting period of 12 hours. I'm not saying he's responsible for the 9 deaths, but that man would not have been able to get that weapon with the waiting period had been what I suggest until you are cleared.
Sanders' opponents have also said his decades-old favorable assessments of such leftist dictators as the late Fidel Castro of Cuba would be rejected by moderate and conservative voters in certain parts of the country. Former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg even suggested Sanders was being used by Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I think that Donald Trump thinks it would be better if he's president. I do not think so. Vladimir Putin thinks that Donald Trump should be president of the United States, and that's why Russia is helping you get elected so you'll lose to him.
The debate comes just 4 days before South Carolina, with its 54 national delegates in play, holds its primary. Biden, who was once the Democratic frontrunner, holds a narrow lead over Sanders in South Carolina, but observers say there is a possibility Sanders could also win that state, putting him in a commanding position ahead of so-called Super Tuesday voting 3 days later, when a massive haul of more than 1,300 delegates is at stake. Richard Green, VOA News, Washington.
Now heading into the South Carolina primary, Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden picked up a powerful supporter on Wednesday when the highest-ranking African-American member of Congress, Representative Jim Clyburn of South Carolina, endorsed the former vice president. And for more insight on this new development and last night's debate, standing by live in Charleston, South Carolina, is Associated Press global media reporter Philip Crowther. Hello, Philip, and what effect do you think Clyburn's endorsement will have on Biden's chances in the South Carolina primary?
Well, it's a crucial endorsement, and it comes at exactly the right time. Representative Jim Clyburn was always going to make this endorsement after the debate here in Charleston, but he was also always going to endorse the former Vice President Joe Biden, because Joe Biden needs exactly that kind of support here in South Carolina if he is to win here on Saturday in the primary. He has always said that this is the state he needs to win. And the reason why is because he has always traditionally had large African-American support. And the endorsement of the highest-ranking African-American member of Congress, of course, will help Joe Biden. But the pressure really is on the former vice president. There is indeed that possibility that he might be surprised by Senator Bernie Sanders here in South Carolina. Those chances are relatively small, though. Essentially, it's a must-win for Joe Biden. If he doesn't win here in South Carolina, then the pressure on him to get out of the race even before Super Tuesday on the 3rd of March will increase substantially.
Philip, so much energy in that debate last night and a lot of focus on Bernie Sanders. How did he do in the debate?
Well, it was difficult, really, to get past all of the shouting and screaming that was happening on stage here in Charleston. It really was a ferocious debate, the most disorganized one we've seen. And this was, by the way, debate number 10 in a series of 12 altogether. But the noise, more than anything, those were attacks on Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders coming from all sides. The reason why is, of course, he is now the front runner in the Democratic race, and he symbolically also was standing center stage here in Charleston because he is the favorite right now. Those attacks coming from all sides, for example, from Senator Elizabeth Warren, saying that she is the only realistic progressive in this race, the only one with the ideas that can also get her elected in the end, that she can actually make into policy. But there were also plenty of attacks from the many moderates on stage, the likes of former New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg, former South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, and then also, of course, former Vice President Joe Biden. The problem, of course, in this race for moderate Democrats is that there are so many of them, and they are taking votes away from each other, thereby making the race that little bit easier for Bernie Sanders.
Now, very quickly, there were 7 of them on the stage. Anyone just about to drop out? Any pressure now? Do we know?
Yeah, there's all sorts of pressure on some to get out of the race as soon as South Carolina is over, and certainly after Super Tuesday, when 14 states vote here across the country. Those who don't get enough votes there, those who don't have enough money after that, they will be forced to drop out of the race. The likes of Senator Amy Klobuchar, maybe if things go badly for Joe Biden, even he might be forced out of the race at some point. One thing is for sure, we had 7 candidates on stage here in Charleston. The next debate debate isn't until after Super Tuesday. There will be fewer candidates on stage that time around.
Phil, thank you very much. Find some shelter out of that rain. Philip Crowther is an Associated Press global media reporter. Space suits are extremely difficult to move in, making it challenging for astronauts to do basic tasks like picking up a rock. A NASA partner has teamed up with a group of Norwegian engineering students to test a glove that controls equipment with small hand gestures. Matt Debo reports.
The concept continues to blow my mind. It really will enable astronauts to explore.
Dr. Pascal Lee has literally gone to the ends of the Earth to test equipment for NASA.
We want astronauts to go to Mars, be effective explorers, to pick up rocks, to examine fossils potentially, to look for life. All of these things require dexterity. When it's pressurized, the spacesuit becomes rigid. Astronauts have a very hard time moving anything. The fingers are difficult to move.
At a conference in Norway, Lee happened to meet some engineering students with a possible solution.
The guy was just wearing a glove, waving his hands literally, flying this very complex piece of equipment, this drone, very precisely. It didn't take rocket science to figure out that this had rocket science applications.
Pascal invited us to join the NASA Hot Mars project for the summer, which was incredible.
To do our field testing, we go to Devon Island in the Arctic. We call Devon Island Mars on Earth. This glove is a first attempt to create an interface that allows the astronaut, with very subtle finger motions, to have these motions translated wirelessly into commands for a robotic system.
Success is leading to more collaboration with the students, who formed a company called Intention.
This year, we're going to test operation of other activities, such as control of an ATV.
Hello. The smart glove can do many things. Hello. But it cannot warn of approaching polar bears. For that, there is Apollo. Matt Dibble for VOA News, Mountain View, California.
Thanks, Matt. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a very good evening.
From around the world, let's go.